I remember standing in line somewhere ordinary, late, like the kind of late where your brain is already home, but your body still has errands to finish. I'd been at work all day, answered emails that didn't really need answers, nodded through conversations that took more energy than they should have. And there I was, holding something I hadn't planned on buying. Nothing big, just easy. What struck me later wasn't the item. It was how little resistance there was. No debate, no pause. Spending felt smoother than thinking. Thinking felt like work. Swiping didn't. At the time, I told myself that was efficiency. Get in, get out, move on. But looking back, it feels more like I paid to skip a moment with myself. I didn't decide. I just flowed. And the strange part is, the easier it felt, the harder it is now to remember choosing it at all. For a long time, spending felt like a way to end the day. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly. You buy the thing, the decision closes, and your brain finally gets to shut a door. Dinner's handled. The night has a shape now. Nothing else to figure out. I didn't notice how often I was using money to finish thoughts. Not to get something, but to stop deciding. Delivery instead of cooking. An upgrade instead of comparison. A yes instead of another internal conversation. I used to call it self-care. And sometimes it probably was. But a lot of the time it was just exhaustion pretending to be kindness. Pausing would have meant sitting in that tiredness a little longer, asking myself what I actually wanted. And most nights, I didn't want clarity. I wanted quiet, so I paid for it. There was a stretch where I thought making fast decisions meant I was doing better in life. Like hesitation was something you grew out of. If I didn't flinch at the price, that meant I was stable, confident, past worrying about small stuff. I remember saying things like, "It's not even that much," without actually checking what that much meant anymore. Speed became proof. Slowness started to feel like failure. What I didn't notice was how often I confused certainty with comfort. I wasn't sure, I was just tired of thinking. And spending quickly felt adult in a way pausing didn't. Pausing felt like second-guessing myself, like admitting I wasn't as settled as I wanted to believe. Looking back, that confidence had a cost. Not all at once, just quietly. Every time I skipped the pause, I paid a little to keep the image intact. Subscriptions were the easiest place for this to hide. $5 here, $12 there. A free trial I'd definitely cancel later. Everything framed as monthly, which made it feel smaller, kinder, almost polite. Once something was recurring, it stopped feeling like a decision at all. It became background noise. A line item I didn't really see unless I was already stressed and scrolling. I told myself the total couldn't be that bad, that I deserved a few things, that everyone has these. And they did. That was the comforting part. But one night, I added them up. Not dramatically, just out of boredom. And the number wasn't devastating. It was worse than that. It was normal. Normal enough that I'd let it happen without noticing. That realization sat heavier than any single charge ever did. Group spending always felt smoother than solo spending. When plans were already moving, it felt rude to slow them down. Dinner turns into drinks. Drinks turn into another stop. Everyone's swiping. No one's talking about numbers. I didn't want to be the guy who broke the rhythm, so I didn't. I told myself it was about connection, about being present, about memories. And some of it was. But some of it was just paying to stay invisible, paying to not explain, paying to not have a separate thought. There were nights I went home feeling oddly empty for someone who'd been around people the whole time. That's when it hit me. I wasn't buying connection. I was buying smoothness. And smoothness fades fast once you're alone again. Delivery apps showed up in my life quietly. At first it was a treat. Then it was a solution. Then it was just how dinner happened. The fees blurred into the total so well I stopped seeing them as separate. I wasn't ordering because I loved the food. I was ordering because deciding felt like too much. Cooking meant planning. Planning meant caring. Tapping a button meant relief. At some point, I did the math. Not aggressively, just honestly. 2 or 3 deliveries a week. $15 in fees each time. Over a year, that was over $2,000 I'd spent not on food, but on not having to think. That number didn't make me stop. It just made me uncomfortable. And I realized that discomfort was the thing I'd been paying to avoid all along. Upgrades were sneaky, larger size, faster shipping, better seat. Always framed as just a little more. And most of the time it was. What I didn't ask was what I was upgrading away from. Usually it was waiting, or mild inconvenience, or the feeling of not getting the best version. I told myself I valued my time, but sometimes I think I was just allergic to friction. Any moment that asked me to sit still felt like a problem to solve with money. Those extra dollars never hurt on their own, but they stacked up quietly. Not enough to panic over, just enough to notice later and wonder where the breathing room went. Credit cards made everything feel lighter, not cheaper. Lighter. The swipe happened. The moment passed. No immediate loss, just a promise to deal with it later. Later always felt far away. Future Jake could handle it. He was more organized, more disciplined, more awake. What I didn't realize was how often I borrowed calm from him. Every swipe was me saying, "Not now." And he kept getting stuck with all of it at once. The bill wasn't shocking. It was familiar. That was the unsettling part. I'd been rehearsing this outcome without realizing it. Over and over. Quietly. There were expenses I never questioned because they were just normal. Everyone had them. Everyone talked about them like weather. Rent, streaming, coffee, the cost of living like a person. I used "everyone does this" as a shield. It kept me from asking whether it worked for me. Normal felt safer than intentional, but normal has gotten expensive, and not all at once. It crept. Slowly enough that I adjusted without noticing. My baseline moved. My expectations moved with it. At some point, I realized I wasn't choosing this version of normal. I was inheriting it and paying monthly for the privilege. Gas station stops didn't feel like spending. They felt like punctuation, a coffee, a snack. Something small to mark the moment. I wasn't hungry most of the time. I was just there, on my way, in between things, and $5 felt invisible in those spaces. But $5 3 times a week is almost $800 a year. I didn't feel that number in my body when I swiped. I feel it now. What bothers me isn't the money. It's how automatic it was. How little presence was required. Those purchases filled gaps in attention, not appetite, and I barely remember them. I used to think spending helped fix moods. Bad day? Treat yourself. Long week? You earned this. And sometimes, sure, it helped. But I noticed how short the effect was. The relief didn't last. The habit did. I kept reaching for the same fix because it was easy. Pausing would have meant noticing the feeling underneath. Restlessness, irritation, boredom. Money let me step over those without naming them. And for a while that felt like coping. Until it started feeling like avoidance. Quiet, well-dressed avoidance. Planning ahead always felt heavier than reacting. Reacting had energy, urgency, a pulse. Planning felt like admitting responsibility. So I waited, then paid more. Last-minute flights, rush fees, convenience charges, all framed as unavoidable. But a lot of that urgency was self-made. I wasn't unlucky, I was unprepared. And preparation felt like work I kept postponing. Spontaneity sounded better than what it was, which was me showing up late to my own life and paying extra to catch up. Daily habits are the hardest to see clearly. Coffee, snacks, small routines that feel harmless because they're familiar. I avoided adding them up for a long time. When I finally did, it wasn't devastating. It was just real. $3 a day is over $1,000 a year. $5 is closer to $2. Seeing that number didn't make me angry. It made me quiet. Because I knew I'd avoided it on purpose. Knowing the number didn't ruin the habit. It ruined the excuse that it didn't matter. At some point, pausing started to feel like deprivation. Like I was denying myself something I'd earned by being tired. Hard days became justification. And there were a lot of hard days. Or at least days I told myself were hard enough. I blurred the line between reward and escape, between rest and spending, and I didn't notice when rest stopped being free. I wonder sometimes when sitting still became something I felt I had to buy my way out of. There were times I spent money just to avoid awkwardness, covering a bill, saying yes to something I didn't want, paying instead of explaining. Money became a social buffer, a way to keep things smooth, to stay agreeable. I told myself it was generosity, and sometimes it was. Other times it was fear of friction, fear of being seen as difficult. Looking back, I think I was renting comfort instead of building it. one small charge at a time. None of these things felt dangerous on their own. That's what made them work. They were scattered, separate, easy to justify. It wasn't until I looked at them together that they formed a shape, a pattern, a system I'd built without meaning to. Each one felt manageable. Together, they explained why money always felt tight, even when nothing was wrong. I'd been treating patterns like coincidences, and that was comfortable until it wasn't. Most of my spending happened when I was tired. Not emotional, not impulsive, just worn down. End of the day. End of the week. End of my patience. That's when decisions happen. When presence was lowest. I wasn't making choices at my best. I was making them at my most depleted. And then judging myself later as if those were the same version of me. Energy shaped my finances more than any plan ever did. That took a while to admit. I avoided totals for a long time. Not intentionally, just gently. A glance instead of a look. A scroll past instead of a pause. When I finally looked, really looked, I felt it in my stomach. Not panic, recognition. That was the part I didn't want to look at first. Because once you see it, you can't pretend you didn't know. And knowing doesn't fix anything. It just removes the fog. The first few times I paused before spending felt strange. Not empowering. Awkward. Like standing still in a moving crowd. The pause didn't give me answers. It just showed me the question, do I want this or do I want this moment to be over? Sometimes I still spent. Sometimes I didn't, but the pause changed the texture of it. It made the decision feel heavier. More real. Visibility does that. It doesn't solve. It reveals. The other night, I stood in the same kind of line as before. Same tired feeling. Same easy option within reach. I didn't buy it. Not because of discipline. Just because I noticed the moment. Nothing dramatic happened. I went home. The night stayed quiet, but later, a small number kept floating back into my head. Monthly, yearly, not as a lesson, just as a weight. It wasn't victory, it was honesty. And that felt different than I expected.